This call is a follow-up to the excellent session that we had last Thursday, where Ledcor, ITC, ETRO, and Smith Brothers Wilson shared their enhanced site safety protocols so that we can all navigate COVID-19. Those materials, along with additional materials from Sorry, that was my fault. I touched my cursor on my Surface and got rid of all of you, so my apologies. So the materials presented by Ledcor, ETRO, ITC, and Smith Brothers Wilson are on our COVID-19 resources page, along with additional materials from Bird Construction. So thank you to all of those members for sharing. And I would invite anybody on the call who has more materials to share, please send them and we'll post them. And that way we're seeing everything. So before we kick off, just a couple of things. I want to do some housekeeping first. So if all of you could please mute your phones, because it just avoids feedback when presenters are presenting. So please go to mute. The bar at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there's a camera. There's a mic button, so please mute that. Further along to the right, you'll see a little text box. That's where you can click on the text box and you can post your questions. And that way it helps us to create a speakers list, so everybody has airtime. And then the one furthest to the right next to the red phone button, is a list of the participants on today's call. So you can come and go as you please, and you won't be disrupting anything. So that's the housekeeping. So before we formally approve the agenda for today, Tom Plum, Kinetic, you wanted to have a 30-second time to make an announcement?
Yes, thanks. Good morning, everyone in the construction industry. This socially correct thing to do these days. Mm-hmm. We received a call from another contractor similar size to us from Vancouver, requesting that because we were closing our business, do we have any staff that they could have? I would just like to say that I don't know where that rumor came from. It is not true. We started 3 weeks ago being very proactive in finding ways to keep our sites open with all the protocol required. We've had our first WorkSafe BC inspection done 2 days ago, and it went off with flying colors. If you hear the rumor, do me a favor. No, we're staying in business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. So Kinetic is open for business, and good for you. Thank you for making that clarification, Tom. So without further ado, I'd like to call for a motion to approve our agenda today. We issued the agenda with the invitation. So Richard Chipway, are you available on the line today to approve the agenda, please? Or
yeah, I'll approve that. I'll first that.
That's Richard.
Did you hear that?
Seconded by, so who was the first voice? Sorry.
So that was me. Sorry, I'm on my two phones. So
all
Richard,
right.
I'll approve the motion.
Okay, and could we have a seconder, please?
Kevin. I'll second.
Kevin, thank you so much. Anybody? I'm assuming that everybody is okay with the agenda. So unless I hear anything else from you, we'll assume that the agenda is approved, and let's get to work. So a lot has happened since last Thursday's GC call. Not only did we have a significant amount of sharing that day across this group, and thank you again to everyone. Just after the call, the provincial government took the step to define essential services, which includes construction, both new builds and maintenance work. So that's good to have that clarity. And then throughout the coming days, or the last few days, both the provincial and the federal governments have announced a variety of financial aids, both to individuals and to businesses. Particularly, there's been a lot of focus on the federal programs, and they are taking a three-pronged approach, those being the Canada Emergency Wage Supplement, and that is paid to businesses, so employers, to help keep their people employed. And that's where the businesses will receive 75% up to a salary or up to an amount of 58,700 under certain criteria. So that helps you to either keep people employed or to rehire the people that you have perhaps laid off in the last couple of weeks. There's also a Canada Emergency Relief Benefit, and that is for individuals who are unemployed, and that's a payment of $2,000 for those without a job. And then the Canada Emergency Business Account, which is the provision of a loan of up to $40,000, which is interest-free for the first 12 months, which will help to create cash flow for our small, medium, and large businesses. And there's more to that. There's a number of other programs available to create credit and to create cash flow, liquidity. So those are all good things. So the combination of the call, the essential services definition, the financial programs that are in place, federally and provincially, has brought what I would say a sense of relative calm to the industry, and I'm hearing it from our colleagues across various associations that we meet with on a call like this every day. A lot of work still to do, obviously, but it's good to have certainty and a path. So the purpose of today's call is to continue to share, and we'll do that towards the end of this meeting as we did last week. But the bulk of today is to hear from our colleagues at WorkSafe BC and also from the Council of Construction Associations, COCA, about the support services that they have in place to help us navigate this new world. Both associations have an integral role to this process, and they are essential partners in this process. So I'd like to welcome Team WorkSafe BC and Team COCA. So with that, I'd like to introduce Chris Back. He's the Director of Occupational Health and Safety, Consultation and Education Services at WorkSafe BC. Also Dan Strand. Dan is the Director of Prevention Field Services. And Tom Brocklehurst. Tom is the Director of Occupational Health and Safety Practices and Engineering at WorkSafe BC. These gentlemen will each have some points to make over the next 20 minutes, and then they will be followed by Dave Baspali, who is President of COCA, along with Grant McMillan, who is a prior president of COCA and now a strategic advisor to COCA. So welcome to all of you. I can't imagine what your worlds are like these days. And thank you, therefore, for making time at short notice to meet with us this morning. What I can tell you is that in the last couple of weeks, as we've wrapped our head around the requirements in order to build safely, our members have been working very proactively, reviewing and adapting their safety protocols in order to comply with the various protocols in place, and then sharing them across our membership. So with that, we're looking forward to hearing from you and continuing to work with you as we navigate this new world. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, Fiona. And thanks everyone for inviting us to come and speak with you today. So Dave Baspali had sent the request out to me to see if I could attend for this session this morning, and I thought that it might be valuable to bring along Dan and Tom as well. Just given the portfolios that we have in the organization, we felt that between the three of us, it would be much more streamlined in being able to answer the questions that might come forward. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ask Tom to start things off and talk a little bit about what WorkSafeCC's overall approach is to COVID at this point in time. And then Dan can come on after that and speak a little bit about our inspectional approach and how the officers will be working with the employer and worker community out there. And then I'll pick it up after that and talk a little bit about our consultative approach in consultation education services and how we're working with industry. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Tom and we'll go from there. We recognize we have 20 minutes, so we will definitely try and stick within that time frame and open it up to questions after that. So thank you. Tom, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much, Chris. A pleasure to be here today. Following along the comments that were made at the opening, so much has evolved so quickly over the past week or 10 days. We're not in the same even frame of reference where we were a week ago. So that's been the challenge for us in sort of keeping up on how we're approaching our sort of inspectional enforcement and outreach activities in connection with COVID, because it has evolved so quickly. So in terms of an approach that we would take, and I'd look at it through the lens of enforcement and compliance, but this is what we would hope that employers are actually doing out there. We're from the Provincial Health Office in terms of the lens we'd look at compliance through. We are not sort of designated enforcement the officers for the public health. We're not like the bylaw officers, but we do sort of take the orders and guidance from the Public Health Office very seriously. We look at it through the lens of our compliance regime. There's a general obligation on employers to ensure the health and safety of their workers, and workers to take steps to protect themselves and others. And so we would look at the guidance from the Public Health Office as informing that obligation. As well, there's positive obligations to protect workers from the transmission of biological agent, which includes COVID-19. So again, we look at the data and look at what the public health officer is saying around practices that at workplaces are intended to protect the general public through the lens of protecting workers. So with respect to construction, we are taking very seriously and hoping employers out there are also taking very seriously the physical distancing requirements, the limitations on numbers at workplaces, as well as ensuring that there's the opportunity for good hygiene practices, so ensuring that there's a washroom facility, not the ability to for workers to wash their hands. So these sort of basic components is kind of where we start in looking at what employers should be doing out there. Now the devil's in the details, we know. So when it gets to site-specific practices, that's where we need to be, I think, talking to employers directly about how they're best implementing these things. And we know sometimes, construction sites are dynamic workplaces, and there are practices where it's not really possible to have that physical distancing, but we're hoping that work practices that minimize those contacts and make sure that they're as transitory as possible, we'd hope that would be in effect. So that's kind of the basics in terms of where we're coming from in terms of compliance and enforcement, our approach. And maybe Dan could speak more to our, inspectional activities out there.
Thank you, Dan. Sorry, thank you, Tom. Dan?
Great, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. A few things that I'd like to discuss. We have a number of different angles that we use to, again, inform and educate and provide guidance. And one of those elements is our Health and Safety Information Center, which is a call center that is manned by prevention officers. That's ramped up significantly since February 24th to March 23rd. We've received 2,300 through that call center, increase of 200% COVID-19 calls now. account for 70% of activity through that call center. Questions being asked still and just general questions around preventing exposure. So.
Sorry, Dan, we're losing you. The line is quite broken.
Driven to that process again. There we go. Employers and workers obviously to call and ask and get a prevention officer directly through that line. But overall, what again we're looking at is asking whether again employees.
Sorry, we're losing you again, Dan. David, David Weir, is anything happening on the back end that is a problem here, or is it Dan's line?
It is most likely Dan's line because his video is also frozen. So I'm thinking his Wi-Fi connection may just be taxed at his home.
Okay, so you know what? Why don't we give Dan time to regroup? Or what? You want to try again, Dan? Or should we move to Chris?
Yeah, I can jump in if that's appropriate. Can you hear me okay, Fiona?
Yes, clear as a bell. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. You know, when Dan gets back on, he can speak a little bit more about how the officers are going to be approaching the work out there with employers. And maybe I'll just take a few moments to talk about what we're doing in consultation education services. So for those who have worked with our team in the past, we were previously known as Industry and Labor Services. We've now moved to Consultation and Education Services as our group, and we typically work at the industry association level, the labor organization level, and the health and safety association level. So we work a lot with VRCA and COCA and BCCSA, the BCCA, the various other regional organizations, road builders, and so forth. We have dabbled in employer level work in the past, not a lot in construction for the most part. We have worked at the industry level, and that is still our first priority during COVID at this point in time, is to really get out there and deliver similar messages to what the officers are delivering and what Tom talked about at the industry association level. Work with our HSAs. I mean, many of you have probably seen the BCCSA website. They have done an excellent job in pulling together information for your industry. And in fact, they were out of the gates much quicker than many of the other HSAs, and we've actually looked at a lot of their information and linked to that on our website. They've done an excellent job. And so we are supporting the HSAs in anything they might need, recognizing what questions they're receiving from employers, so that we're also aware of what types of issues and challenges are coming forward in being able to comply with the provincial guidelines coming from the provincial health officer. But what we're also looking at doing within consultation education services is taking a consultative approach at the employer and worker level as well, and really aligning ourselves with the efforts of prevention field services. So Dan has roughly about 300 officers in the province. I've got about another 40 people on my team. You know, we're kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the size of Dan's team and what the officers are out there doing, but it does give us an opportunity to go out there and work at the employer level and just add to the capacity of being able to provide assistance to employers as best as we can. Many of you have probably seen the essential services list that came out from the provincial government on March 26th. That includes all of construction, which is excellent. So we are focusing on the essential services industries. But really what we also need to recognize is many of the health and safety associations in the province, including BCCSA, they also have outreach and consultation services at the employer level. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll be working closely with our HSAs, with BCCSA, to ensure that we're not overlapping any of our efforts. That's not what we're intending to do here. We don't want to go out and be meeting with the same employers that the HSAs are meeting with and asking the same questions. That's just going to duplicate effort and waste the time of the employers, and that's not our intent. So, you know, I heard at the beginning of this meeting that someone's already had a few inspections. We are not out there to duplicate the efforts of the officers either. So we're doing our best to coordinate the work that all of us are doing so that we're getting out to as many employers as we can and providing the support and answering the questions and helping them deal with the challenges that they might have. So as we begin to engage with the employers, and I should say that all of this engagement will be done virtually. We won't be going out and meeting face-to-face with any employers for obvious reasons. We will be calling employers and working with our industry associations to determine who we should be going out and working with the most. But essentially what we'll be doing is finding out what the employers have been communicating to their workers around COVID-19 and what controls they have in place to prevent and reduce the risk of exposure in the workplace. And really encouraging employers, if they haven't already, to take action to correct and implement any gaps, if there are any, within the workplace. We're going to discuss actions to prevent COVID-19 spread amongst workers, including the obvious, such as hand washing and physical distancing, which Tom spoke about at the beginning, and really help employers through the joint committees, through their joint committee representatives, to identify the tasks and locations in the workplace where the hazard of workplace exposure to COVID is likely to occur, and help them to identify any controls to prevent the exposure. And then where appropriate, we also recognize that the mental health side of things is front and center for a lot of employers as we're going through this. So where we are recognizing that is having an impact on the employer, we do want to be able to discuss the psychological safety and the potential for increased risk, also due to distraction, particularly with higher risk activities. So, you know, with COVID going on and the exposure to COVID going on, we still have other health and safety risks that are still apparent within the workplace, and we need to ensure that that employers are continuing to focus on those issues and not taking their eye off the ball, so to speak, and there is a level with everything we're going through right now. So we do want to ensure that the employers are continuing to focus on those issues. And then lastly, our intent is really to be able to direct employers to the available resources that we have on our website, on the HSA's website, and through the various other organizations that are out there that have done an excellent job of getting resources and information up on their websites as well, and really just try and help employers navigate through the issues that they're faced with. So that's really all I wanted to say at this point, Fiona. Maybe we can give Dan another shot, see if his mic is working a little bit better, and he can talk a little bit more specifically about what the officers will be doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. That's a great summary. And I'll come back to the points that you raise once we give Dan some time. Dan, if you wouldn't mind keeping your camera off okay, and just go with audio, that may help the connection. Thank you.
There you go. All right. Thanks again. And so just to follow on with what I was saying, we do have the Health and Safety Information Center driving a lot of that business with respect to what we call action requests. Through all COVID-related action requests, we've seen 2,700 of them come through in recent times and generate a number of inspections. We've contacted about 500 employers thus far around COVID in our inspection-related response. And in construction specifically, we've seen about 500, 600 action requests, and we've attended 190 sites to date. And so from a high level, the orders that we're seeing are still about training, inspections, and some emergency pieces. But we are following, again, a consultative approach that looking to, again, support employers' understanding of these obligations as it pertains to worksite occupational health and safety. So what we say is we're not public health officers, and we're not here to enforce the provincial health officers' orders, but we are looking at, again, how that translates in workplaces and ensuring workers are utilizing the hierarchy of controls in order to evaluate the workplace and then take necessary precautions to protect those workers. So that's our general impetus for how we're communicating and conducting inspections, but very much consultative, having more of it's remote primarily. Again, we're concerned that we're not going to be part of the problem and have officers become vectors for disease and be sharing it site to site. So we're very cognizant of that and have conducted significant training and have an exposure control plan ourselves, and investing in that part of the business for our own officers with respect to, again, the basic hand hygiene and physical distancing and such. So all those steps are in place. We're trying not to become a problem in work sites. We recognize the struggles that employers are under. But having said all of that, we did have and continue to have our high-risk strategies and construction being sort of one of our major focuses in that regard. We are utilizing the COVID conversation as somewhat of an icebreaker, but then we will carry on and continue to have conversation around prime contractor responsibilities, fall protection, some of those things that continue to seriously injure workers. So that work hasn't stopped altogether, but we're being very much mindful of the pandemic situation and want to ensure that's looked after. But there's still high-risk circumstances in workplaces and construction sites that continue to drive a majority of our officers' activity. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So thank you to Chris, Dan, and Tom for setting the scene, for giving us some insight into your processes. I hear the word consultative coming up a lot, and that's great to hear. We are all in this together. We're all charting navigating an uncharted path together. So we really appreciate the fact that you're using the opportunity to consult, to coach, to hear all the good things that our members are taking to ensure that their sites are safe, even more safe than normal. And thank you for that. I'll hold the questions for now so that we can, there's some questions beginning to develop at the side, which is great. I'll move to COCA, and let's hear from Dave and Grant, and then we'll move into a good amount of time, approximately 30 minutes for Q&A. So Dave Baspali and Grant McMillan, welcome.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm going to try to do without video. I just wanted you guys to have a quick look at me, and then we'll see if it's a little bit more stable if we just do it with the mic. So keeping it reasonable in terms of time, because I think the meat and potatoes here is really the questions. And I want to thank Chris, Dan, and Tom for attending, because you couldn't have three better people. All three of their portfolios really encompass what we would consider to be the WorkSafe BC's response during this pandemic and how they're working. So they're going to be great to answer the questions. Also want to take a moment to thank Fiona and Chris Atchison for the leadership. Now, from a construction point of view, you guys are an essential service. That means something to this government and actually to our economy. Without what you're doing right now, there is no economy. So the heavy burden on the associations right now is to make sure that you are properly supported and that we go back into a role to make sure that we have things like information exchange is good, resources that you need. We've talked about Mike McKenna and BC Construction Safety Alliance, excellent repository resources. WorkSafe BC, excellent repository resources. Then there's this, what I would consider to be consultation service and a help desk. COCA has really decided that that's probably our best role in this time. So if your members out there have questions or concerns, and this is really about things that fall between the cracks. So you're following the rules as you knew them before the pandemic, and all of a sudden the COVID-19 chief medical officer and the public health has said that you have to do it this way. What does that mean to the rules? Have things changed? which rules are more important than other rules. What we tend to do is work with our partners at WorkSafe BC to clarify that. They themselves are looking to public health to see how things are being set out. And we're trying to rationalize this thing so it makes sense in your world on a daily basis so your people can keep working, keep the economy strong. We're also doing advocacy. Fiona's brought together all of the leads for all the associations. And you know, the one thing that would make me crazy if I was sitting in a construction circumstance is just the inundation of information you're getting from everybody. So in an attempt to try to curate that and make it make sense, so that you're not having to search around for stuff at this time, we're doing our level-headed best to kind of divide it and move those responsibilities to various associations and then make sure the right information is getting to the right people. That's why I think this call is fantastic. It really does help people get a moment of some of their questions that are hot pursuits right now answered. And then I would consider to be coordination and support, trying to pull the various pieces as we learn them together so that they're actually in harmony as we move forward in the response. Number one in this COVID circumstances, nothing's changed around safety being the most important thing. Your workers, yourselves are the most important thing. And what COVID really does for the construction sector right now is really throw us a curveball in the sense that it's a different way of looking at your job sites. So we're asking everybody to familiarize yourself with the resources that are out there, make sure that everybody top to bottom understands their responsibility. And as we work through this circumstance, it's very fluid together. We'll continue to seek clarity in those things that chafe or rub or actually cause problems, particularly around social distancing and really confined spaces and people working in proximity to one another, et cetera. So I'm not going to go much further than that. I'll let Grant add a little bit more color commentary, but I will leave you with COCA has a help desk set up, covidhelpdesk.cocabc.ca, and we can send that out around for you guys. If you have specific questions and aren't comfortable maybe going straight to WorkSafe, you can come through us, but also you can go straight, as Dan Strand was saying, to WorkSafe as well with your concerns if you want to seek clarity and get comfort over that. But today is about finding out some answers. So let's quickly to Grant and then over to the Q&A. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Dave. That's a great summary. So thank you for that review. Grant, colourful commentary, Dave said.
No, Dave has done an excellent job of summarizing. I just want to say that COCA's job, in part with respect to COVID-19, is to separate fact from rumor. There's so much rumor going around that it's confusing people as to what they should or shouldn't do. So our role in part is to ensure that we give the facts out and separate it clearly from those things that are not true. I'd also like to thank you, Fiona, and David for his assistance in setting this up, and let's work together and get through this. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Grant, and thank you to Team COCA because, and also to WorkSafe, of course. I can only imagine the numbers of calls that you're all getting from our members, and in WorkSafe's case, other industries. It's not just construction. So thank you for all the heavy lifting that all of you are doing. So thank you to all. Let's move into the Q&A, and I see some questions beginning to develop. So just, I'll buy 1 minute of your time just so that you can gather your thoughts and put your questions online. I have a question just for starters, and it's to Dan. And Dan, you mentioned that approximately 600 actions have been created coming out of the construction industry that's resulted in 190 site inspections. Can you just give us a quick overview of what triggers a site inspection?
There's a number of different triggers, but when we hear of things regarding sort of high risk scenarios, if there's people working at heights without fall protection, for instance, categorize them.
We've lost you again. Sorry.
Darn.
We've lost you again.
Sorry.
Want to try one more time?
Yeah. So we have 911s, which is again a high risk scenario that will dispatch automatically and immediately for those. And that's a determination made as we triage the calls. So 911s get an immediate response. 811 would be within 24 hours. If perhaps the activity has ceased, and then normal is just information requests. That can take a week to respond. So we triage the requests when there's a high risk circumstance or violation being indicated or a right to refuse. Those are the kinds of things that'll trigger an immediate response.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to move to the questions. So if you would like to see the questions, just click on the little text box on the bottom of the screen, the chat line, and you'll see, after you get through all the participants, you'll see the questions beginning to formulate. So the first up is Clark Campbell, and Clark is asking, referring to Dan's reference to WorkSafe BC's own exposure control plan. What is that plan? What to expect when their inspectors show up on site? So over to Team WorkSafe BC.
Well, again, just like most employers, we look at the work we do and how then obviously we're going to control that the risk of exposure. And so we utilize a process called dynamic risk assessment that asks that the officer will ask questions of the circumstance and the employer that they're about to visit to confirm whether we should actually even be on site. And so those are conversations about, you know, has there been any sick individuals or anything from that perspective? And is it, again, safe to proceed with a site inspection? So we have pre-inspection risk assessments, checklists and such that they go through, and there's conversations again, the circumstance and the situation, and that then will again drive our decision whether to proceed or not. So it's, again, it's an occupational safety document that we have internally, and but more based again around dynamic risk assessment and checklist activities, much in line with what public health is requiring. Awesome. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Clark, for the question. A question from Ricard Venenter. Is there currently a backlog for administrative requests like third-party hygienist report approvals at WorkSafe, or should contractors expect a longer time for approvals as part of the COVID protocols? Good question. Maybe Tom. Who would like to field that?
Well, I'm not familiar with any backlogs, but you know, we are seeing in many areas, yeah, just the difficulty in obtaining services, and it's an area where, you know, from our perspective, we've put in place things that extend, for example, first aid tickets, right? So first aiders can't get their certificates renewed, blasting tickets, things like that. So we're very mindful of that type of thing, how difficult it is in this environment for those types of services to be provided. Your specific question, I don't have any information on, but if there is a backlog or difficulties obtaining services that are necessary, it is something we're very sensitive to, and we are looking at ways forward to make sure that we balance off both, you know, the realities and the practicability of the situation, as well as ensuring the appropriate level of health and safety are maintained. Perfect. Thank you, Tom. A question from Seaforth Construction. So the scarcity of hygiene and PPE materials poses a big challenge, and their availability. What is available in terms of resources for those working in hospitals, care centres, general job sites? Were there any talks from government or otherwise to support the construction industry to remain operational on sites and keep workers, clients, user groups safe? So this is all part of the medical supplies, safety supplies conversation that's happening at every level, federally, provincially, and locally. Who from WorkSafe would like to take that question?
We've been in discussion with the Ministry of Health and their infection control specialists, and they give us every 2 days we have a conversation about other.
Dan, sorry, we've lost you again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here.
No worries.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. So we're in conversation with the Ministry of Health, and we get indication that availability of PPE is a significant concern for healthcare. The conversation around N95s and the availability for those high-risk occupations where they're intubating patients and providing that respiratory support is where they're again focusing their supplies. There is a big repository of product of these kinds of respirators, and as you read the media, and as I do as well, there's a significant amount of industries getting into the business of masks and such, and I haven't personally seen sort of the effect or the outcome from that perspective, but there's more, and even hand sanitizer. You have breweries getting into distillation and conversion to hand sanitizer factory instead of alcohol. So that's interesting from that perspective. There is the biggest concern they have is with the advent of the United States circumstance is a diversion of all PPE down south to then sort of dry up our availability. Right now, there's not a huge concern, but they are starting to think about rationing to a degree. Also, sterilization of masks is being contemplated, whether it's hydrogen peroxide or ethylene oxide. So interesting kind of circumstances. And again, under the current circumstances here in today's world, the innovation that's transpiring, I think, is hard.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to the point of supplies, just yesterday, April the 1st, the BC Business Council, in partnership with the provincial government and I think it's the technology cluster, launched the COVID-19 Supply Hub. And we have a link to the Supply Hub on our resources, our COVID-19 resources page. And that is a call for either donations and or supplies of the variety of supplies needed, not just at the front lines in the health sector, but for those of us who are on the front lines in other ways, such as construction and so on. So take a peek at that Supply Hub, because you may be able to donate. You may be able to benefit from the supply of those materials. So because there is that ongoing conversation around, is there enough PPE for everyone who needs it in order to stay safe? So thank you for the question, Ken, and thank you for the clarification. Awesome. I don't see any more questions on the line. Are there any other questions from the participants? Or are there any questions from WorkSafe or COCA? What is it that do you have questions of industry, since we have them here?
Well, Dave here from COCA. One thing that we're getting a lot of phone calls about is this thing I would characterize as fear out there, particularly the small contractors, the guys that are sub-trades. And I'd be curious to see how some of the general contractors, the primes, are supporting the small guys during this circumstance, because we're the kinds of calls I got, I would say are almost counseling or crisis counseling. Like they just want to know that there's some sustainability and commitment to the projects that are out there. How are you guys handling that?
So I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll invite the GCs to provide the specifics. But certainly my experience with our members and the conversations and the emails with our members in the last 2.5 weeks have been similar to yours, Dave. There's been a lot of questions. There's been a lot of anxiety around what does it mean for industry. I can tell you that everybody wants to continue to work. The companies want to continue to work, and their workers want to continue to work. However, we need to ensure that we're complying to the highest standards. So that was the beauty of last week's General Contractors call, where the members who presented gave some fantastic detail about what the steps are on site. That has been posted to our COVID-19 resources, and we monitor the links, we monitor the clicks, and it's those links have been given over 1,000. It's in excess of 1,000 views in the last, well, since last Thursday, in the last 7 days. There's been a heavy emphasis on member approaches. So from that perspective, our industry wants to stay working. Our workers want to continue to work, all of the above safely. And our members are actively sharing with each other. So the big companies are sharing with the small and medium, and we're trying to raise everybody's boat. So that's from my perspective, from an industry association perspective. Would any of the GCs like to elaborate on that? I don't want to.
Dave William.
Yes. Hi, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning. One of the things that we're really making an effort to do is the physical distancing education. One of the things that would be helpful, and I'm not seeing any advertising, and it might be helpful if the provincial government, maybe WorkSafe BC, can do a campaign about physical distancing and about reaching to the 20, the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, the guys in our industry that think you can't touch me, that will be the ones that we're all trying to educate. You know, the reality is this whole new way of doing things goes against our social being for the last number of years, and now it's about, okay, now I've got to think 2 meters away, and the younger guys aren't necessarily thinking that. And for me, we're doing that, trying to do that on our site, but it would be helpful if government and WorkSafe BC would do an ad campaign to really hammer home to those guys what this means.
That's a good point. That's a good point. To Chris and the team, do you know, are there any plans from government to launch a campaign around the importance of physical distancing for everybody?
Well, it's Chris here. I mean, I definitely appreciate the comment and being able to look at how we might be able to do a campaign. I mean, undertaking a campaign is sometimes bigger than it might seem. I think at this point in time, sort of our thought at WorkSafe BC is that most people should know about, you know, you're kind of, I guess, living under a rock if you're not aware of the recommendations coming from the provincial health office at this point in time, and the importance of the physical distancing. I think we feel that the information coming from our website, from BCCSA's website, from the other various websites out there, as well as the announcements that come out on a daily basis from the provincial health office, I think constantly are speaking to the importance of you know, the hand hygiene and the physical distancing. But I do hear your point, and what I can do is, you know, I can bring that back to our group internally and have a conversation with our marketing team and see what their thoughts are on whether or not we could take something on that would go along those lines. How quickly we'd be able to mobilize an actual campaign, I'm not quite sure. That's not really my area of expertise. But at this point in time, I'm not aware of a campaign that is planned. Definitely not one on our end. There may be one on at the provincial health office level that I'm unaware of. Dan, Tom, I don't know if you have heard at all about what might be happening at that level, but not within WorkSafe BC at this point. But I can definitely bring that back.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I can confirm. Yeah, I haven't heard anything along those lines either. But it is a useful point to make, and we hear that as we kind of move forward and try to think of ways to support industry better. So maybe it's not a campaign, but maybe there's you know, some materials we could put out, or some other type of product that we could produce more quickly than a campaign that would assist in supporting employers when they're trying to implement physical distancing and other practices like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I know that given the presentations that happened last week, there are a number of GCs at least, and that's probably extending to the trades and the manufacturers and suppliers who we will meet with next week, by the way. They have T-shirts printed with, the usual construction signage, the triangle, and requesting everybody who's looking at them to stay 2 meters apart. So it doesn't need to be a fancy campaign. It doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be a fancy campaign. We just want to ensure that everybody understands the importance of physical distancing, because when we hear Dr. Henry's comments, it sounds as if the steps that we've taken as a society in BC over the last couple of weeks are beginning to show positive results. Now, that doesn't mean that that we're through this. Far from it. And Dr. Henry makes it very clear that we have not peaked in British Columbia and that we have a long way to go. But the fact that we're paying attention, that we're being physically distant, is helping to manage the number of positive cases in British Columbia. So we just have to keep doing it and keep doing it for some time until we're out of this, which could be several months, as she mentioned on Friday. I'm seeing some good.
It's Chris here. I just thought if maybe I could add to the comments. I also do think that probably one of the most effective ways at this point in time of getting the message out is through the employers. The employers have direct access to their workforce through various means, and I think continuing to be able to message that, in your toolbox talks in the morning, obviously with everyone keeping their 2 meters apart from each other. But those toolbox talks in the morning, to be able to speak to your staff about the importance of this. And I totally hear the comment that the 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds are thinking they're not, even if they do get it, that it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's not going to be any worse than just a common flu. But I think what's important to understand is if they get it, even if they have minor symptoms, they then become a conduit of passing it on to other people. And they may be passing it on to other people who are immune or who are elderly and who are going to be dramatically impacted or potentially dramatically impacted by the situation. So I think, yes, again, we will bring that back. We'll see if there's something we can do around a campaign or additional resources, additional messaging related to physical distancing. But I do think probably one of the fastest ways and most effective ways of getting that information out is through the employers, through all of you, to your subcontractors and to the workforces that you're all working with and communicating with and connecting with on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Fiona, it's Dom here from Bird.
Yes.
I just want to add, some of the challenges that we're facing, I agree the education campaign needs to happen, where there's an aggregate collection of information so people can make informed decisions, almost on a daily basis. I would say I'm not alone in this. A sub-trade worker, symptoms, all of a sudden that worker was on somebody's site or came from another contractor's site, showed symptoms, and people just start to panic and spread misinformation or don't focus on the guidelines under that Dr. Bonnie Henry has provided for construction, or don't use the screening tools that define what close contact means and how you self-isolate or self-monitor. And that really is the area that we need more education. I think the physical distancing, we're starting to find ways to figure that out. And even in the guidelines that were issued on the 22nd and updated on the 30th, the language is flexible where possible. Follow social distancing or physical distancing. So they recognize that it's not always possible in everything that we're doing, but I'm dealing with a situation today where on a site, one of our clients' employees has tested positive. And of course, they're nowhere near anywhere where we are working, but they're part of a large organization and potentially they might have walked by the site. Well, now we have sub-trades who are wondering what information we have and whether or not they should go in self-isolation for 14 days. And that's difficult to manage. And when trades and workers are asking for us to continue to keep our sites open, what we need to do is make sure people aren't overreacting. I'm not saying that you minimize or discount what is occurring, but you got to investigate it and you got to fully understand it so that you can disseminate that information and share it. But yeah, for the last half an hour, I've got 20 emails going, do we shut down our site for 3 days because somebody might have walked by? Like that is the challenge. And of course, on every TV commercial, pick Tim Hortons or Wendy's, contactless pay, contactless collection of your food. And politicians telling everybody to stay home while construction workers are essential. There's mixed messages in the media, and that's part of the challenge. We don't have a media campaign to counteract those things, and we need that.
Hello,
Point well taken. Yep.
Barry McCarty with Ledcor Construction here. I guess I wanted to share with everybody on the call some of the things that we've done to reassure our contractors that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. And it's not just our contractors or our workers at the site. One of the things that we've identified is that many of these people's partners or spouses are also dealing with quite a bit of anxiety. Yeah. So we're managing two things really. And we found the best way to do that for us has been to provide what we call an FAQ. And in that FAQ, we outline all of the activities job site we've implemented to manage COVID, so they can see how fulsome it is. And we refer to the regulations and we refer to the things in the BCCSA so that they know that these aren't only Ledcorisms, that these are industry-wide initiatives. And we found that that's really helped them understand the risk exposure at our job sites. So just sharing that with the group, that FAQ will go a long way to people seeing how fulsome all your preventative measures are.
Well said, Barry, and thank you. And I agree. I mean, I hear Dom's concerns, and I also and I hear the cry for a campaign, and I hear your comments, Barry. It really, we're in a world right now that is depending on clear and accurate communication and education, and that's not just to help the construction industry succeed, it's to help keep the general public calm. And it's a challenge because there's lots of I wouldn't say I guess conflicting messages or perhaps confused messages. So and that's the role of VRCA and its various counterparts across the association world is to, and that's why we come together every day at 3:45 for half an hour. What are we hearing? What are we doing? What's the messaging? Is there confusion? If there is confusion, let's sort it out. So, but I take your point, Barry. It's and we probably have that FAQ loaded on our site. So for anyone who's wanting to take a look at that, please click. We've got a few more minutes, 10 more minutes of Q&A, and I'm just looking at some of the questions. So I'm going to condense a couple. A question from Mike Wallace at Flynn, who's one of our board members. Are there guidelines to manage, for example, two people being in a vehicle at the same time? What I would, because some people cannot, we have a lot of situations where two people cannot work alone safely. This mirrors a question that came up last week about some task-specific activities that cannot be done in isolation because they would be unsafe if they were done by one person. So therefore, in order to be safe, you need two people to conduct the activity. And I know that BCCSA issued a great bulletin just the other day on steps that can be taken if social or physical distancing is not possible. To the WorkSafe team, would you like just to elaborate on that or just do a quick summary of what happens when we cannot be physically distant on site?
Yeah, okay, so it's yeah, so this is the types of questions we're starting to get from employers and others right now. It's starting to get into the specifics of how you actually implement some of this physical distancing. And we appreciate it. It's very, very challenging. The two people in a vehicle is a specific question we've gotten, and it's actually one we've directed back to the Ministry of Health to get some guidance on. As one of the callers here mentioned, a lot of the language you see from the Public Health Office, it's a bit flexible. It's some shoulds, it's think abouts. So they're not really drawing a line in the sand on a lot of these things. But from our perspective, we want employers to be taking a good hard look at at their practices, going through the hierarchy of controls. So put in place engineering controls that prevent contact, put in place work procedures that minimize going within that 2-meter distance. None of that's possible, potential for some PPE. So with respect to, work practices that might put workers in contact with each other or within that 2-meter zone, we're looking at employers trying to minimize those, trying to make them as sort of transitory as possible, have them well planned out, well thought out, so there's good work procedures around. And as a final, the final step on the hierarchy, PPE, although, we're not going to get too prescriptive about what PPE is necessary, not recognizing the challenges in sourcing it, providing it, and using it well. So it's a bit of a judgment call, and are working with employers and others to work through how they make some decisions. With a lot of things, not a hard line in the sand. Those instances where there's sort of control.
Thanks, Tom. Can we put our phones on mute? There's somebody running a tap, maybe opening a yogurt carton. I'm not quite sure. But if you could please mute, that would be very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to condense a couple of questions around hand washing stations on site. Are they mandatory? Is question number one. And the second question I'll roll into that is hot water hand washing stations necessary on site?
Yeah, it's Tom again. So yeah, do you need good hygiene facilities on site or to make other arrangements? So if perhaps it's a workplace where you have access to some third-party site, whether it's, I don't know, a restaurant or a mall or something like that. But there does need to be provision for hygiene facilities. And one of the things that was raised with us a while ago is the difficulty with temporary washroom facilities. The hygiene has been through the use of hand sanitizer and the difficulty of locating hand sanitizer right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking employers to be creative about how they get hygiene facilities to their workers. So the use of sort of portable hand washing stations, the use of even cold water in some basins and some hand soap. I think that goes a long way. So we are, there are requirements to ensure that there's good hygiene available at these workplaces.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Dan here, and I can add to that. What our officers are seeing out doing these inspections is that there's a greater awareness of that requirement. It's brought to our attention again through a lot of those action requests, inadequate hand facility, washing facilities, and so, my employer or this work site is not doesn't have anything in place, and so they make that complaint through our means. But we are seeing now there's again light at the end of the tunnel. More and more work sites have adopted. They've either constructed their own and they've crafted some unique ways of plumbing in some water and temperature control. Of course, temperature control is more comfortable, but where that's not possible, tepid water with soap with clean hand towels is going to go a long way as well. So there's been an over-reliance on hand sanitizer. Now, the fact that that's starting to become in short supply, there has to be a means to wash up.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Another question around N95 masks. This is from Urban One. So during the shortage of N95 masks needed by workers for proximity tasks, what other types of masks will be accepted in the short term as substitutes? We have, for example, sourced some FFP2 masks, which are basically N94s. Comments on that, WorkSafe?
FFP2. I know that there's all sorts of N99 and N100, P100, and a number of different masks. Whether this one fits with the regulation N94. Tom, I might have to defer.
Tom, do you have some comments?
Yeah, try to get unmuted there. Okay, yeah. At this point, we're not, sort of delving into the specifics of PPE at this point. We're recognizing that the challenges in sourcing sort of the right types of PPE, as well as knowing that, overall, those more at-risk workplaces, healthcare, and those types of workplaces should take priority for those types of PPE. So, it's not, we don't want to be in a position of pushing sort of, lower risk industries into tapping into that supply and causing that supply not to be available for higher risk workplaces. So it's an issue that we're looking at. We're hoping employers will do their due diligence in thinking through the PPE they provide. But again, the PPE is sort of the lowest on the totem pole in terms of providing protections to workers anyway. So we're hoping that there's a better, a bigger look at how, the distance guarding and protections are put in place, as well as work practices put in place, and not to kind of jump to the PPE.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple more minutes on the Q&A before we thank our guests for their presentations. So one question from John Paul Glaze, and this is a question to the GCs, but perhaps WorkSafe and or COCA have some comments too. So do any of the GCs have an efficient, contactless, expedient method they're using for workers' daily wellness checks? Now, this is something that Ledcor spoke about quite a bit last week on their call. I'm going to jump to Barry, if you're still on the line. Don't want to put you on the spot, Barry, but for example, what steps is Ledcor taking, for example, to ensure workers' daily wellness checks?
Thanks, Fiona. So we've developed a process, and we ask them initially to complete the health questionnaire. And the health questionnaire is based on the self-assessment provided by the Public Health Authority. And then each day we ask that the workers' supervisor discuss with the workers how their health is and inform us each day how their workers are doing, and provide us with a list of workers that are in attendance on the site that day. And at the end of the day, we request that the supervisor contact us again and just let us know how it worked out. Were there any changes in worker health? And if everything's good, that's great. And we document all of that. And we sort of do the same thing again the following day. We don't do temperature checks. Our understanding of the equipment that's available to do that right now is that there's a 2% or 3% error in that equipment. And so I know that some people in the industry do that, but we don't do that. We, like I said, rely on people to do the right thing, to monitor their own health well. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Thank you, Barry. And I see a comment from Tom Plum of Kinetic. We have discovered quite a powerful conditions management protocol that the site teams taught us. Tom, do you want to take a couple of minutes to expand on that?
Yeah, it was, I guess anybody that follows me on LinkedIn would have seen this, because I was just floored by what we discovered in one of our management meetings. We found that some of our site staff social contracts, and they meet in 6-foot spacing in a big circle, and they hold each other accountable for what they did last night, what they did on the weekend, what did you do on the way to work. You can't memo that activity, and all our sites are now doing it. It's a very powerful tool to make them, and the supervisor must extract himself from the circle, right? Because often people won't be honest with their boss in the circle. So he's out of that. It's their contract, and I was just absolutely floored and thankful by what they've done.
Wow, that's very, very powerful, Tom. Thank you for sharing that. I just got goosebumps listening to that. That's taking physical distancing way beyond construction sites, which is what we need to do. I mean, yes, we need to be very, very safe on site, but we have commitments to our families and our other colleagues and communities at large. So well done, Kinetic, and maybe you've seeded some ideas for others to take a similar approach on the line. Thank you for sharing that. I'm conscious of time, folks, and I said that we would do Q&A until 8:40 because we've got a members-only component now between now and 9 o'clock. So I want to say a very sincere thank you to Chris Back, Dan Strand, Tom Brocklehurst of all of WorkSafe BC. Thank you to Dave Baspali and Grant McMillan of COCA for all the good work that you're doing. We really appreciate your time today and for fielding our questions. And I will ask our guests now to disconnect from the call, and I'll ask our GCs to stay on the call so that we can have a member-only discussion as we normally do in our division meetings. So thank you to the guests, and we'll let everybody disconnect, and then we'll continue with the GCs.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone, and keep up the good work out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we just want to take another 15-20 minutes max because we do have a hard stop at 9 o'clock, folks. I just want to, first of all, say thank you to everybody who's doing you're all doing the good work on site. We've had some great conversations since last Thursday, not just with other GCs, but with trades who are accessing the materials that you have allowed us to post. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for helping everybody, not just yourselves and your divisions. I would invite anybody on the line, any of the GCs on the line who have enhanced safety protocols that you would like us to post and share, please send them our way, send them to myself or send them to David, and we'll post them so that everybody gets the benefit of them. So a couple of things that I want to do in the next few minutes is first of all direct you to our new COVID-19 resources page. So you know, the new world is evolving very, very quickly, and we've taken the opportunity over the last literally 48 hours to retool our resources page so that it reflects what our members need now. It's the original version has served its purpose, and now it's time to think differently. So this is David's just put the screenshot up. So this is our new resources page. It launched last night at around midnight. So David, if you can just scroll to the top. So the first, and what I should say is the page is trying to convey all aspects of the journey that we're on, and not just site safety. So the first three pieces is a preamble that explains what COVID-19 is. We also create some health links, so we've made some access to health links there, which are health links that anybody, whether you're in construction or not, can access: emergency numbers, travel restrictions, and so on. That is just the stuff that we need to know. It's the basic boilerplate stuff that we need to know and communicate. And then our third piece there is questions. So this is a site that will continue to evolve. And we ask for your feedback. If there are sections that are missing, if there's content that you can help us add, please send them our way. And then the sections that follow are in alphabetical order. So we're starting with B, business preparedness and continuity planning. So we've got some links there that give reference to some materials that will help you to plan. Then we go to F, financial assistance and economic recovery. So those are the various grants and aids, financial aids that are available federally and provincially, as well as, there you go. So there's the provincial stuff. And then yesterday, BC Hydro and ICBC made some announcements of the credits and deferrals that are available now. So it's important to take a peek at that. And then we also want to give some airtime to the SRED program, which is the tax credit service that we are offering through Invent. And it might seem odd to include that there, but if you have teams who are working remotely, who are perhaps not as busy as they sometimes are, this might be the opportunity to identify innovative processes and work with Invent to put the tax credit application in place and get some money back. So that's why that's loaded there. Then we move to H, health and safety and mental health resources. And there we've got a variety of links that you can open up coming from the government of BC, through WorkSafe, through the BC Construction Safety Alliance, COCA. On COCA, you'll see, and BCCSA, I should say, are doing a fantastic job, as it was referenced this morning. COCA is doing a fantastic job with their helpline. So there's the template, click to the template. So if you have a question, complete the template and then send it to the email there, covidhelpdesk@cocabc.ca. And then the next section from VRCA members are the content. ETRO, LMS wasn't on the line last week, but they've also worked with some GCs and trades to put some site safety standards in place, and also Smith Brothers Wilson. So I invite you, if you have content that you would like to share, please send it along and we'll add you to the list. Then we go to human resources. There's a tip sheet from our benefits plan provider. Then we've added a couple of links of how to work effectively from home. So we're hard focused on site activity, but we must not forget that a number of our employees are working from home, and that's a whole new world. That requires a different type of management. So take a peek at those articles. And then we've also taken the opportunity to load the Construction Job Centre. So whether you're looking for workers or whether you're a worker looking for work, please take the opportunity to look at the Construction Job Centre. And then we want to provide links to our education programme. Given the need for physical distancing, we've moved our classroom courses as much as possible to online, and we're going to continue to source new content online so that even while working remotely, you can still have access to the content that you need. Our events program, obviously, again, we're unable to have networking opportunities right now, so we've had to reschedule some of the activities. However, rest assured that we're exploring some further technology which will help us network virtually, so stay tuned for those details. And then we've taken the opportunity to load the various updates, the 5 emails that we've issued in the last couple of weeks. We issue those updates when I feel that it's important to have something in your hands directly from me. And it's usually because there's something super important, like the definition of essential services, the content that's shared by members. When I feel that I need to get that to you ASAP, that's when we issue an update. Otherwise, we'll just continue to update this page on a daily basis. Then at the bottom there, we've got a variety of partner association links. Obviously, CCA, BCCA, the BCCA Employee Benefit Trust is our benefits provider. And then the other associations where our members have relationships, CLRA, electrical and mechanical contractors, roofing contractors. We've provided you with a link to their homepage as well as to their COVID-19 resources page, and we'll be populating that partner association links. There are others that we will continue to add. We're working with, on our call every day, we have ICBA on the line, we have the road builders on the line, so we will continue to populate that list and make sure that you have access to those folks as well, because we're all working together and it's important to stay connected. So that's the new page. It's not finished. This is, as of roughly 10 p.m. last night, so it was last updated last night. We're going to continue to populate it today with insurance information, with legal information, and we'll continue to load updates from various sources as and when they happen. I hope you find it helpful. If there are areas that are missing, please let us know, and we'll build it into the alphabetical order. But the intent is not to be the mother of all resources pages. We want to curate it, and we're curating it really carefully so that you have what you need. There's no fluff on this page. It's what we hear you need, and we'll continue to build it out that way. So with that, I would like to open it up to the group. Thoughts on today's presentation from WorkSafe BC? Are there questions that you would like to ask that you weren't perhaps comfortable asking, or are there GC to GC questions that you would like to ask? And what else can we be doing to help you on this journey? I'll open it up.
Fiona, the one question I had was the 2,700 alerts or requests for investigation.
Yes.
And so we've seen it a couple of times where we've had people, you know, we're getting to a situation where there's people hiding behind bushes, you know, Inspector Gadgets trying to kind of get the see, construction is not, and it's given what we saw before this COVID exploded, whether it be the you know, the protests and so forth, different people are utilizing or using different. So one thing that I was just curious about the group, but has anybody else seen any of that? Because we've seen it now a couple of times on some of our sites where people are hiding in the bushes, you know, trying to get pictures. And so can we reach out to WCB and vet that? Because that becomes in itself a bit of a distraction apart from everything else that happens on our job sites.
And is it, just for clarification, Ricard, is it the WorkSafe BC inspectors who are hiding behind bushes?
No. I don't think it's the WorkSafe BC. I think it is everyone else that's against construction or against any particular project or resource project, or that's why, I mean, 2,700 is a fair amount. Now it could be some workers, I don't know, but there could also be some other movements that are you know, jumping up and trying to catch it. I mean, I think people are getting comfortable with COVID to a certain extent, and now they're realizing that it could be a way to promote some other agendas, and so they're jumping on the wagon. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, and that's just my thoughts.
Good point. Does anybody have any comments to that or to add to that? No? Okay. Thanks, Ricard. We know that, I mean, there's lots of media out there, and we're fielding media still asking about, you know, why construction sites are continuing to operate, and with the clarification of essential services and expectations, it's an easier conversation now with media. But there are a lot of the general public are still concerned, and having the daily calls across the various associations, we also hear that there appears to be a hard core of individuals, perhaps working on a national level, not just a local level, who are agitators, who are calling it out on media, who are posting unhelpful comments on social media, taking photographs, so on and so forth. So we're all aware of the risk of that. We've probably fielded a couple of agitators already at VRCA, and that will probably continue. So I think we just need to be extra vigilant. I think we need to, as we are doing anyways, doubling down on the enhanced protocols and proving them wrong. Thank you for the question, though. Let's just see, we've got some questions. Can you speak to the general sentiment of the sub-trade supplier community on the steps being taken so far concerning worker safety? Thank you, Darren, for the question. We're having session with our trade contractors and our manufacturers and suppliers next week. So very similar to the call that we had with the GCs last Thursday. The reason that we focused on GCs first is because you have the overall responsibility for site, and we wanted to make sure that you were sharing and to be successful in your role. So now, with last week's call and today's call, we're going to move to the trades and the M&S and to hear what they have to say. Generally speaking, they're anxious. They are anxious. The small to medium ones particularly are anxious. And we're hearing from our partner associations that the trades in particular are concerned about their payables, not just immediately, but further down the line, which I'm sure we're all concerned about. So I will have a better answer for this question next week once we've had that engagement with our trades. The reason that we're combining the trades and the manufacturers and suppliers is because we want to hear from the M&S about the supply chain and what are the pain points in the supply chain, which will also impact trade activities. So I hope that answers your question for now. Let's just see. There's one question here from John. Can we establish a list of suppliers on the website that can provide hand sanitizer, masks, gloves, etc.? Good question, John. And yes, thank you. We've been approached by a number of members in the last few days with products and services that fit perfectly with the needs of a COVID-19 environment. Even last night, I spoke with a company that has normally focuses on water filters, and now they're filling them with hand sanitizers in bulk. So we will be establishing that list of companies that have products and services, and we'll make sure that we push that out to everybody once it's up and running. So that's on our to-do list. But great question, thank you. And that is it. So folks, I'm going to 8:57. I'm going to thank you very much for attending today and for your questions and for sharing. Keep up the good work. My question to the group is, would you like to continue with these check-ins, or do you have enough right now to keep going, and we'll check in with you in, say, a couple of weeks? It would be good to get some direction from you on that. Any thoughts? 2 weeks, please. Weekend checkly are very helpful. Okay, let's. I will take that offline, and we'll let you know. We'll just take a look at what else is happening next week. Our weeks are quite well, they evolve day by day. So we will reach back to you on the frequency of the meetings. I agree with you. I think these are really helpful. It helps us stay connected, and it helps us continue to share. Let us focus on the trade contractors next week and get them up to the same place that you're at. And then going forward, what I'd like to do is bring the 3 divisions together. So once we're all at the same level, we'll continue to move forward as a group of 3 divisions. So that's the game plan over the next couple of weeks. So let me, I'll take that out offline, and we'll figure that out in terms of timeline. Meantime, it's 8:59, and I know that some of you have to go. So thank you again for your time. Keep sharing, keep asking the questions, keep telling us how we can do better, and we'll deliver to the best of our ability. So have a good Thursday, a safe Thursday, and we'll chat soon. Thank you, everybody.